Joe Rogan has an interesting and kind of sloppy conversation on the resurrection with comedian Chris Distefano. Check this out. This is on Joe Rogan's podcast, basically the biggest podcast in the world, and he has on a comedian, Chris Distefano, not known for Christian content, to say the least, but lately he's been talking to a lot of people about his belief in Jesus and his belief in the resurrection, and that's what they're going to talk about here.
But just for Jesus, this book was saying that the reason why they believe the historical accuracy of it is because his haters and the disciples were both saying the same thing. So you have the Romans saying, yeah, this is what happened, who hated him, and at that point would be like, get this guy out of here. He's basically causing a revolt. That's why we have to kill him. He's like somebody getting, a protester today. Mm-hmm. They were like, fuck this guy, he's out.
Right.
And so they were saying, yeah, what you're saying happened. And then the disciples are saying it like...
I'm sorry. I couldn't hold it in. It's just so crazy that he's at the stage of his belief in Jesus where he's like describing Jesus with cuss words or describing the gospel, the gospel according to cuss words. It's like, forget this guy, but not forget he's out. It's so crazy to hear it like that. Okay, sorry.
Like a big thing is the resurrection, right? People say, really? He resurrected from the dead? Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, everybody agreed, haters, Romans, and the Jewish people, everybody agreed he died. That's 100%. And you say, well, they buried him in a tomb, and then the next day, or 3 days later, the tomb's empty. And people are like, so, that made up. And they say 500 people saw him in the town. Romans and Hebrew, they saw him over the next couple of weeks. 500 independently sourced people, real, like corroborated, 500 people saw him. Mm-hmm. So you say, okay, so there's that. And then the other conspiracy theory is like, well, the disciples robbed his body. The disciples just robbed his body because they didn't want him. They would hand over crucifixion victims to like the wild dogs. That used to be the way it was. If you got crucified, throw you in a pit, wild dogs eat you, or leave you on the cross, birds will eat you. That's how we deal with you. So they're like, that's why they were taking his body. And then you see like, well, that's probably not what happened. And the Romans themselves acknowledge there's no body in that tomb that we put in there 3 days ago. The body is not there and we did it. So in order to save ourselves, we're going to say the apostles robbed it. But in reality, that's just a conspiracy because the apostles would have no reason to rob it.
So the Romans think the apostles robbed the body.
That's a conspiracy.
Why do you say conspiracy?
Well,
you're just saying a conspiracy to diminish the story.
No. I meant conspiracy in the sense of that's what people say as a reason why the.
Did the Romans say that?
The Romans have said that. The Romans said that back then, and then I guess conspiracy is the wrong word because I'm not.
Yeah, he's using the wrong word here. Conspiracy doesn't sound great, and it's not the best descriptor of a word. There are like words like explanations, and I think that's the word he's going to use.
Like it's one story, one explanation. I'll say explanation.
But if you looked at it like what's the most logical explanation? Is the most logical explanation that a dead guy came back to life, or the most logical explanation that someone took his body because that's what the Romans said?
I'm saying that
he came back to life
one time, and I'm not saying I'm crazy about it. I'm just saying
real quick. So his reason is, look, I just now he's gone from making arguments from a historical perspective to this part, though. I just choose to believe this. And I can tell by the way Chris Distefano talks that he has not been arguing for this for very long, or maybe not arguing for this under pressure for very long. I can just kind of tell with the way he's using his words. And he's a comedian, and they are very careful about the way he speaks. I've heard him talk on podcasts before, and he's pretty clear about the way he speaks. He's kind of umming and ahhing a lot, and he's kind of stalling a little bit in some of the stuff that he says. I get he's probably nervous about this. However, he has gotten to the point where he probably has forgotten the answer to the claim Joe Rogan just made, which is, what do you think is more logical, that a dead man rose and lived again, or that someone stole his body? He just goes, well, I just believe this right now, and I'm not crazy about it. Don't think that I'm one of those weirdos, but I just believe this. Again, I just think that he's a little inexperienced in this. Here's a good answer to Joe Rogan's claim here. Is it logical to assume that Rome, who had every reason to stifle this Christianity that was causing all these problems, and again, problems that for which they killed Jesus, don't you think it was in Rome's best interest to make sure that this guy died and his body remained in the tomb, because bringing him back from the dead would make Christianity even more popular? It would make it even way more popular, which is what it did. And so now we're going to think that these fishermen found a way to either kill Roman soldiers, which there's no evidence that they did that, or kind of sneak behind them when they were guarding the tomb. To sneak behind them or something like that, or to trick them into leaving or something so that they can roll away a gigantic stone and then steal the body, and no one caught them in the process of doing that. I mean, that sounds very illogical as well. It's like the Babylon Bee video that I was referencing in a recent video, or it'll come up in a future video rather. It's like this Babylon Bee video on the resurrection.
We are going to steal his body.
Okay, I'm tracking with you. What's next?
And then we're going to tell the whole world that he rose from the dead.
Oh, you know I'm in.
I love it already.
All right, classic. Then what?
And then we're all going to get brutally murdered.
What motive did they have? If they realized that their Messiah and their Savior died, and he promised them that he would rise again from the dead, what motive do they have to bring him back? What motive do they have to, and by bring him back, I mean bring his body back. What motive do they have to do something that would be further evidence that he lied and that he was not who he said he was? Especially given the fact that if they were to have stolen his body and then told everyone, no, he was legit, he was actually the Messiah, he's actually the Son of God, and therefore now they're going to live their lives poor, struggling, being persecuted, and then die brutal deaths? How is that logical? How is that logical at all? Or maybe it's the case that this man, Jesus, who, again, every historian worth his salt says he existed. Even skeptics who don't believe in God say, no, Jesus was a real person who existed, and Jesus was a real person who died because of who he was, and because of the problems that he caused for the Jews, and the Jews leveraged that with Rome. That's not something that is very hotly contested or debated at all. So again, what interest do they have, the apostles, the disciples of Jesus, in saying, I know that this guy was a fraud because he died and he remained dead, even though we stole his body, and now we're going to live the rest of our lives for a lie and suffer and brutally die, even though he told us he was going to rise again? How do you square that away? How do you answer that? I really appreciate Chris DeStefano trying to answer this to the best of his ability. And again, he's trying hard, but how do you, again, is that really logical to you? That's what the disciples did? Or is it that this guy that we know did these amazing things, these miracles that are talked about and written about, maybe he actually did that stuff. And maybe he actually was who he said he was. Maybe what is talked about him historically, and by the way, the Bible's a historical document as well. It's just as reliable as so many other ancient documents that we have, and in many cases, way more reliable. In fact, Chris DeStefano says this a little bit earlier about the reliability of the Bible. He says, if you believe in Alexander the Great and you know stuff about his life, then much more you should believe about the stuff that's talked about in the Bible. Way more reliable as far as manuscripts are concerned. So if we believe all that other stuff, then we better believe the Bible as a historical document. And again, watch this podcast. If you watch the full thing, I'm at the 2-hour mark at this point of the video. They start to talk about this at about 1 hour and 53 minutes or so when they talk about manuscripts and go back and forth a little bit on that. Let's see what else there is.
Saying, you know what? After reading that book, there was enough things.
He's talking about The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, by the way.
That happened that historical scholars who aren't religious, some are believers, some are not,
right?
Are like, this existed and this happened.
But you're talking
scholars believe that it happened. Let's see Joe Rogan's response.
About historical scholars from 2,000 years ago.
Right.
and their knowledge of science and biology and
Right.
life and the universe itself was extremely limited.
Right.
And so their entire fundamentals, like everything they believed in, was based on mythology. Everything was based on gods.
Hold on, but a historian's job is not to be excellent at science. A historian's job is to record history.
And demons and
Okay, so then
He's
what?
basically saying they were idiots back then, so they couldn't record history.
What about this? All right, fine. What if the Romans? Okay, they made it up, right? I'm
made
sorry.
what?
I mean, the Romans are correct. The disciples took the body, who everyone agreed was
Okay.
dead. What about the 500 people that saw him in the town over the next 6 weeks?
Did you talk to those people?
No.
So who knows
I don't
what
speak
they
Hebrew.
believed, but who knows what they actually believed? Who knows how they said it? Who knows if it was a religious thing? You look, there's people that have mass hallucinations all the time about a lot of things.
Mass hallucination theory, the explanation that everyone mass hallucinated in all these different parts of the world at the exact same time. Jesus was in multiple places after his resurrection, and somehow there was something in the air that made everyone mass hallucinate.
And there's people that
That's more logical?
you could give them false memory. False memory is a real thing. Someone can convince you that something happened that didn't happen.
Right.
It's real. It's like they've demonstrated how to do it. We all know friends that have a memory of something, and you go, "That's not what happened," and then you
Yeah.
say your version of it, and then everybody has to like figure out what really happened.
Right.
You know, you're like, "Do you remember that time we were at the game and you said this?" I didn't say that. Like that was not me.
Yeah.
That was Mike.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yes, a side conversation that happened at a baseball game years and years and years ago. That's the exact same thing as, hey, there's this guy, and everyone in the world is talking about, everyone in our world is talking about him. He's doing these miracles no one else has ever done. And then he just got crucified. He was crucified, brutally died, and then he rose again, and we saw him. That's not the same as a conversation you would have at a baseball game years ago. That's not the same at all. You saw a dead guy. That is not the same at all. Again, if you want to check out the rest of that clip, go ahead and do so. It's a very interesting conversation, but it's so interesting to me how Chris Distefano went from someone who didn't believe in this to someone who did believe in this. Joe Rogan seems to have always disbelieved in this, and he doesn't seem to be open to the logic of the other side at all, because the logic of the other side includes a miracle that is attested to, historically speaking. And again, there's a clear reality in a lot of skeptics that this cannot be true. So therefore, they interpret everything through the lens of this can't be true, and they don't consider evidence for the other side. I am someone who's believed the other side. Now I'm on this side. But a lot of the people who are skeptics can never say that they've truly given consideration to the other side. Let me know what you think, though. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, consider supporting on Patreon. But especially, I want to hear your thoughts. God bless you. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.